Good afternoon, folks. This is Kimberly Jesika reporting in live from Hollywood, California, and we are doing a podcast for Huffinton Pos, and I'm super excited today because I have some amazing human beings on the line with me, and, this podcast, this radio show is extremely important. It's important to me because I have some amazing human beings on the phone that not only are they bringing comics to the world, but they're bringing comics to Sandiego-Comic-Con. In addition to this, this is a personal thing for me as well, and I'll get into that later because right now this podcast and this interview is about them and what they're doing, and I'm just really excited because comics is the way that I learned. It's my learning modality on how my brain works. And so I'm just really excited that I have some folks on the line that are they're coming to Sandiego-Comic-Con, which is the biggest comic festival in the world, and they run a niche comic company that is focusing comics for gender and racial equality. So without further ado, I want to introduce the founder and CEO of Women in Comics, Regine Sawyer, on the line with us, visiting California all the way from New York. And I'm really excited because we also have ray-felix on the line with us as well. He's the guy that's in Women in Comics. So without further ado, Regine and Felix, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. So, I want to hear both your stories. We're going to go for about 30 minutes. I want to hear both your stories. I want to hear how you started. Just tell me everything because this is so exciting. So, jump in and share with us what brought you to a place where you knew that you wanted to start working in comics. Tell us the story.
Well, I've always loved comic books since I was a little girl. My brother and I would read comic books together, and we would watch The Hulk and The Greatest American Hero, and my father would read the Sunday Funnies to me. And then as I grew older, I just started to love the medium even more so. And I got into mainstream comics, like X-Men, and I liked Archie too. And as I went along, I realized I wanted to make my own characters, so I started drawing my characters and started writing stories for them up through high school, and I sort of put it to the side once I got to college because it's like, oh my God, I need a real job, right? So after college, graduated and started my other career as a corporate food service manager. So I've been in corporate food service for about 12 years, but at that point, I was in it for about 2 to 3 years, and something hit me. Something said to me, like, Regine, you really need to get this comic book stuff started. So I started working for an independent company as a managing editor, and I would edit scripts. I would even transcribe the owner's hand transcribed scripts. I would review submissions. I would get tables at conventions. I would do marketing and all that great stuff. And I was with that company for a good year and a half before I said, you know what, I can do this for myself. So Lock It Down Productions was established in late 2007, and we've still been going strong. And then about 4 years ago, ray-felix, who is the founder, coordinator extraordinaire, organizer of bronx-comic-con, as well as a fellow comic book producer, and he said, well, why don't you do a Women in Comics panel at bronx-comic-con? I'm like, what? Are you serious? Me? He's like, yeah, you'll be great. So we did this panel discussion. And the response from the audience was amazing, as well as from the panelists. Like, as women, a lot of them felt like, wow, someone really cared about what I had to say about this industry. And it's like, yeah, people do care about what we have to say. So from there, we started doing more panel discussions and more workshops, and we do art shows. And then one day, Ray and I were having lunch, and he was like, why don't you do a Women in Comics Con? I'm like, really? You think people will come? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So we had our first Women in Comics Con last year in the Bronx, and we had our second one this year, and it went wonderfully well. the overall mission of Women in Comics is to, number one, promote literacy through comics, get kids and adults reading more. It's also to promote women that are in the industry and highlight their merit, highlight their craftsmanship. A lot of times in this industry, you don't get to see that because it very much is a male-dominated industry. So that's basically what we do, and that's what we've been doing for the past 4 years.
Wow, I love the fact that, I just love what you've done. I mean, I felt your energy as you were sharing how you got started, and it's like you took the entrepreneurial route. And, there's so many comics out there, like you said, but they're not niched. And I have to say it out loud, I don't see a lot of brown women or Latinos or Latinas in comics. It is not. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I could be being ignorant. I could be being ignorant right now about it.
It's okay.
They're sprinkled around, but they're not major. They're not majorly a norm in there, but they're sprinkled around.
Well, at least for the mainstream.
Yeah.
At least for the mainstream. If you go to
Exactly.
independent comics, you'll find many women of color.
Yes, you'll find many. In the independent realm, there's many.
So, Ray, tell us your story. How did you get started? I just love the way that, Ray, I have to applaud you. I mean, it's like you seem like you opened up a door with Regine, and it just kind of put the word from there. I mean, all the way here to Hollywood. This is amazing. Tell us your story, Ray.
Basically, after doing comic conventions for about 8 years, I realized I was putting money in a black hole, and it wasn't really going anywhere. And I was like, why am I giving money to these big companies that don't really represent us? I know all these people in the comic conventions, all these other vendors. I should just organize my own show. And as an educator, I wanted to have a literacy component in there so that to attract kids and new readers. So I came up with a gallery show called Bronx Heroes in 2008. And basically we're just showing, and that's when I met Regine, actually. That's the first time she was one of the vendors there. And from that gallery show, that it also had a component of a pop-up comic book convention at Hostos College. And from there, I was like, hey, I could do this every year. This was kind of painless. And they started growing and growing and growing. So we moved from Hostos College, we did 2 years there, 2 years in Bronx Museum in the Bronx. And thanks to the Bronx Council of the Arts, with their support, they began to fund when they started seeing that it was a successful venture to invest in. They basically gave me workshops and panels to attend. And they basically gave me the tools to teach myself how to apply for grants to fund these events and also my own books and my own creativity. So now we're at the New York Library Center in Fordham Road and in the Bronx. And like Regine said, we kind of came up with this idea of doing Women in Comics. And the last 2 years, we've been just, applying for grants, trying to get funding and then also, getting more vendors, bringing about awareness, advertising our show so that things, so it can grow in awareness because there's a need. Women, young girls, there's a need for women to be involved in literacy. And as a teacher, I see that females are left behind. They're not really invested in. We focus more on the males. If you look at the ratio of who raises their hand more in a classroom, it's usually boys. And, I know we have a lot of females. They're more shy and timid to answer. So if you give them those more opportunities as far as being entrepreneurial and giving them creative outlets, because a lot of girls are just like, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a veterinarian, I'm going to be, a mortician. These are some of the things that they say in the Bronx, based on what they see on television, like CSI or like some of these shows. So they see female roles and these professional roles, which are great, but their parents are always saying, well, you can't be an artist because you're not a male. I see boys parents are more supportive of the artistic ventures than male fathers and mothers towards their daughters. So opening up that door and, working with like the Kubert School and taking kids on college trips, and especially females, like the majority of kids I always take on trips are girls, so they can see like the comic book museum, the like Society of Illustrators or the Kubert School, and put them on tour, and then they end up taking those opportunities. I had my first student graduated from Schubert last January, and she's a comic book artist now. So I think you have to give those opportunities and say it's not just for boys, it's for girls. And it is, let's face it, who's the number one consumer of products? It's women. So it's a no-brainer that, if women consume more than men and the fashion, all the trends are surrounded by women, why wouldn't the comic book industry, or why wouldn't, the creative outlets of art? So that's what we're trying to create.
Wow. And I love the fact, again, I had no idea of your story, Jay. No idea. And I love the fact that you and Regine talk about the educational component. Do you know that that's not something that's really focused on? Did you realize that?
Oh, yes, I know that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Not even in schools is it really focused on. I think literacy and comics and art is a major factor in understanding the world around you and understanding yourself. Everyone needs a creative outlet. Like Regine's a writer, and she writes these amazing stories, these amazing sci-fi stories.
She's amazing, and I'm loving the fact that, you're using your comic, educational piece to help kids tap into their inner comic person. That's huge. So you're helping them find areas within themselves where they want to get into the industry because, you're so right when you say to me, that art is not, promoted in school. In the 90s, I was in the Navy, and I had the opportunity to work with Robert De Niro.
Ooh. Wow.
So, yeah. So, I started, as a result of the military was how I got in PR. So when I went back east after working in the entertainment industry, I lived in Malibu. I was a young girl too. I mean, I'm not old now, but I was a young girl, and I lived in Malibu. I lived on the beach in Malibu. I was in the Navy, but I was also working. I did some work with Robert De Niro. That's how I, on the movie The Fan, and with him and Wesley Snipes. And I also was looking to become an LAPD officer. Those are little facts that people don't know about me, that I was literally going to become a cop. I was going to become LAPD at one point. And I love the entertainment industry. And I remember going back east, and I went to law school for a bit. I dropped out, of course. And when I started working in the schools, I still had contacts to television. So while I'm on my lunch break at school, I'm getting phone calls from editors in New York to get people for the Tyra Banks show. Not editors, but producers. So I was all through that time, as I'm working as a teacher in the schools, I'm still putting people on Tyra Banks' show and on Mike and Juliet's show. I never completely left the entertainment industry. I remember taking time off because at one point I had a story that Tyra wanted with my business partner, and Tyra flew me into New York, and I ended up on her show. And then another group of people flew me into New York, and I ended up on the Mike and Juliet show. And I remember I was the morning show girl. And my point in saying this is, going back to what you and Jay said.
That's right.
Art is not promoted in the schools. When I was working with the kids, and I'm going to say this and I'll get back to you guys, but you said something that was profound to me. When I was working with the kids, they probably had an art class and some gym and some music, like, playing the clarinet and the bass, and the violin and stuff. I would have been even happier if they had a guitar class. But art is not promoted. And when I was teaching those kids, and I said, you could grow up and work for Vogue. You could grow up and become a star. They looked at me. Those kids thought that was just totally far out. They were like, huh? That's not a real job, and that's not real. It wasn't real to them.
It seems unattainable.
And I'm here to... It's exactly for what you were, it wasn't, and I feel that, the schools a lot of times make the kids feel dumb because they want to be in the arts. I don't want to be a mathematician. My learning disability was in math. I can count money all day, don't get me wrong. But I still am trying to figure out where am I going to use algebra, because I don't use it. I could be wrong, but I don't see it. I don't see myself trying to figure out the square pi. I don't see that happening. So I like the fact that you guys, you know, are talking about this, and because this needs to be a conversation, Jay and Regine. I'm sorry, I'm off my soapbox, but I get passionate about it.
No, it's okay. I mean, what's interesting is that I think that the reason why schools don't concentrate on it is they think it's frivolous. I mean, that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, you know, at home, parents, especially parents of color, they are scared to death that you are not going to make anything of yourself. And they're like, okay, you're sitting here in the corner drawing, like that's not going to make you money, and they freak out. And when I say freak out, I mean I've seen it. I've seen the concerned looks on parents' faces when they do try to be supportive and bring their child to a convention, and they're just like, look, is my kid going to be okay? Can my kid really make a living? Like, I've had those questions multiple times, and yes, they can. I said, why don't you come to our panel discussion? And we're talking about our profession. And they come to the panel discussion, and there's been parents who have been in tears, like, oh, my God, I was so discouraging to them, and then you told me to come to this panel, and now I know that they can make something of themselves with this art thing. It's like, yeah, they can. Don't discourage them. Don't discourage them. Comics can save lives. Believe me.
You know, thing with that, go ahead, Shane.
No, I was saying that I've spoken to moms about getting their daughters into the art world because they're like, oh, she's very talented, but maybe she should have a backup plan, plan B. I was like, no, your plan A is your plan B. Just do what you want, go for it, and of course, you know, you need to survive and eat as well. But if most people say I have a plan B, and then you focus on plan B becomes your number one plan, and then you never go on to living that dream or moving into that dream. You have to, you know, as a young person, you know, I mean, I became a father at a young age. I became a father to an autistic daughter at age 20. So I didn't have the opportunity. My plan B became my plan A. But if you're a young kid and you just fresh out of high school and you're in college, you should be fearless. You should, you know, make the most of your dream and those careers and not be afraid. There's nothing stopping you. The only one that stops you is yourself. So I always say, forget about plan B. Just go plan A and you know, live your dreams. And those who do it will achieve it.
And you know, that's so true. You're right when you said your plan, when you get that plan B, that's all you end up focusing on, and then you miss out on your plan A. And, you know, I have to say, and I've never said this out loud, but I lived a lie growing up. I made everyone think that, mind you, I knew from the time I was 14 years old, and I was a teenager, I knew from the time I was 14 years old listening to Tears for Fears and Mr. and Pet Shop Boys that I wanted to be a star in Hollywood. I knew from the time I was 14 years old that I wanted to live in California. I knew that. I knew from the time I was 14 years old that I wanted to work in the news, in entertainment. But I lied and told everyone, you ready for this, that I wanted to be a nurse, that I wanted to go to nursing school, that I wanted to be a social worker because it was acceptable to what they wanted to hear. So secretly, I was living a double life, and I never felt confident or safe to share with the adults in my life or the peers around me that I really wanted to be in the celebrity world. And the one time I did say that, I was called ugly and told that I would never make it. I'm not pretty. You know, it was unbelievable. So I never told a soul. And then when I finally moved back to California in 2008, and they saw me on the news interviewing celebs, I did a stint on Operation Repo, and everybody swore my car was repossessed on TV. That was even funny. But people looked at me and said, you never told me that you wanted to do this. Well, you never cared to find out more about me. You never took the time to get to know me. You never took the time to get to know me. You never took the time to get to know what made me tick. So, no, you weren't going to know what I wanted to do. So, again, I'm so glad that you guys are on the forefront. I wish I had you guys in my life when I was younger, when I was a little girl, because I would have probably been a lot farther with a Regine and a Jay in my life. I would have been so much farther, you know. So I applaud you guys again.
Thank you. It's ray-felix.
I'm sorry, Ray. I'm sorry, not Jay, Ray. I apologize. Yeah, I don't want anyone butchering my name. But I got so passionate, it's like I called him Jay. You can call me Ray. You remember that commercial from when we were kids, you know, the gum. So, what's next for you guys? Can you tell us what's next?
Well, this week is San Diego Comic-Con week, and we have
congrats.
Several events going on this week. We have a panel discussion at San Diego Comic-Con on Thursday. So if anyone's going to the con, our panel is Women of Color in Comics. It's at 5 p.m. in room 25 ABC. We have a Cocktails and Comics meet and greet party on Friday. Right now, RSVPs are sold out. But we're going to have fun with that. So that's Friday night. And then Sunday afternoon, we're doing another San Diego library panel. We had one yesterday. So we have a second one going on in El Barrio Logan. And that's about a mile away from the convention center, and that's happening at 1 p.m. And then there's some other conventions that we're going to over the next few months. You can definitely check them out on our website. We have a full event page, and that's www.womenincomicscollective.org. I have books coming out from my company, Lock It Down Productions, and you can check those out, of course, at www.locketdown.com.
And I also,
that's amazing.
I have a female protagonist book called Mawa, the Keeper of the Ankh, which you can find online at my www.aworldwithoutsuperheroes.com. It's like a post-apocalyptic story with a female protagonist, and it's basically a world of a matriarchal system versus a patriarchal system through the guise of sci-fi. And I also have a character in my new book called Pos the Raven. And Pos the Raven is a story about Edgar Allan Poe in the Bronx. He's the latest Bronx hero. And there's another female character called the Sparrow. So it's a superhero story within the real life story of Edgar Allan Poe and about the many women that he was involved with after the death of his wife. So those are the two books, and it's edited by Fawad Khan. So those are
and these are comics. So these are comics.
These are comic books that are coming out. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. And so are any of you looking at turning some of your comics into any form of animation? Because that's up my alley. Where that's basically what I've done with my comics is turned them into I've turned my comics into animated films, scripts, shorts, and sitcoms.
It's funny that you say that. It's funny that you say that because the Edgar Allan Poe, I'm actually starting to develop a proposal for Cartoon Network to try to pitch it this week at Comic-Con. So that we're trying to do with Edgar Allan Poe, and so it's the Raven and the Sparrow. That's the superhero that he is, and we're also making action figures of the Bronx Heroes characters that'll be available on Shapeways.com in the fall. So we're doing like figurines of all the Bronx Hero universe, all the characters.
Who are you going through for your figurines, if I may ask?
Oh, ironically, one of my old students from 8 years ago.
Wow.
He was a 3D designer, an immigrant from Romania when I taught in Queens, and he is now works on films. He's an animator. He does lots of stuff. He graduated from my college. I helped him get into my college, the School of Visual Arts, and now that he's an adult that's married and he's in the industry, he makes 3D design jewelry and female jewelry, and he also does animation cartoon shorts. Now he's designing the action figures for me.
Wow, now that must be pretty expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm having some dolls done too. I'm having some dolls done for my animated film, and I'm getting my stuff done, but I'm actually getting it done overseas. So yeah, it's wonderful to develop the properties even more so that the fans can have more of a a one-on-one, more of an intimate relationship with the characters and with what you're doing. So I applaud you for that as well.
Yeah, and part of it also, what Regine and I are doing, is also creating characters of ethnic diversity. So, people of color can identify with these characters, not just female characters, but, male characters as well. And just so that young teens, children, can identify and have someone that they can look up to, even though it's a fictional character, Like I grew up, watching Superman and Batman, but there was nothing that really resembled my experience. And I'm sure Regine would say the same. There was nothing out there.
Absolutely.
So it's important to create role model characters. Like Muhammad X is Black Power. He's based off of Muhammad Ali, but he's a fictional telling of aspects of his real life. But then, his political stance against the military and stuff that is emulated through him as a superhero, and telling a historical story, an American history story, but also telling a heroic story of this man who actually fought against the powers that be, but in the guise of superheroes. So things like that, and I think it's important for kids.
It's very important. Yeah, because they want people to identify with someone. Like one of mine is Princess Tyler Marie, and she's from Princess El Paraíso. She's a Panamanian princess, and so it has a Disney feel to it. But she's a brown girl with long pink hair, and so when you look at it, you're like, okay, so it looks like she could be like a brown version of like a Belle or Cinderella, and her guy is from another country. So it's also interracial, where it's like love is love. It doesn't matter, if I'm brown and you're light, or if I, you know what I mean? It's about love, and it's about working together to build a better world from everyone. And of course, not comics, but it's a graphic novel. Of course, it has pictures, and it has the two antagonists that or three that want to destroy the peace in the kingdom and all that. So, it's wonderful that, we're all creating content that, our kids can, relate to. And now the challenge is, I'm going to ask the $1 million question to both of you, and please answer the best you can. Have you found obstacles in trying to bring this to the mainstream and joint venturing with the bigger medium, aka TV, aka getting it into places like Marvel or DC, or have you found any challenges in that area?
Well, when I first started, I started submitting my work. I started independent publishing it still, but I started submitting it to various different companies, and there was little to no response. Not only would I mail them in, I would take them physically to conventions and give copies to editors and such. And I didn't hear much back. So once that started happening, I just said, you know what we're going to do is, excuse me, is concentrate on my brand and building it, and find my own distributors, find my own stores to put the books in, and so forth. I haven't necessarily given up on it, but I think in terms of my properties and my work, I think I'd prefer to publish them myself. Perhaps I would freelance and work for other companies and produce the books that they have. But for my work, I think, at least for now, I'm keeping it indie.
You're going to keep it indie. You want to have more control over the product, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the same for myself, because just like Regine, I started out the same way, showing portfolios to different people, different art samples. And then one editor told me many years ago, I think it was in 1999, a convention and they used to have a Madison Square Garden. The guy says, why don't you just make your own book and then people will come to you? So I was like, maybe I should self-publish. And this is before self-publishing was even popular. Nobody was doing it. Yeah, it wasn't popular. It wasn't a common thing. People making their own comic books was unheard of because you have to make thousands of copies. There was no print on demand back then. So it's like, so I ended up making my first two books and printing thousands of them and trying to find my audience. And at first it was slow. I mean, it was realistically getting into the comic book game is not a profitable one. You know, it took about 5 years before I started turning a profit and getting the audience and honing out what materials that I wanted to put out. So I put out different genres. So I started out with comedy, then I went from comedy to action, and then superheroes, and then from superheroes I started doing social justice comics. And when I started doing books that dealt with social justice and taking on a historical aspect with the Bronx Heroes, is when I started getting a response of people like, wow, these are stories about people in the Bronx. And the first hero was actually a true story based on an African slave who escaped from New York City. It was called Runaway Slave. And it was based on a historical account of Livingston's slave. Philip Livingston, he's written, his name is on the Declaration of Independence, and he was a descendant of my family. And I always asked my mom, how are we related to this guy? And she would never really give me a clear answer until I asked my grandfather. And he said, well, we were the children of his slaves. So he had a slave mistress. So he had a slave mistress in Colombia, and he had children. And his children, he was actually an abolitionist as well. So he opened up the first free slave church in San Andres, Colombia, which still stands today. And it was my ancestors.
What part of Colombia?
San Andres. It's an island off the main.
You got to be no. I'm from San Andres.
Yes.
I'm from San Andres. My family is from San Andres. San Andreas.
Yes.
Yeah. La Isla San Andres, Colombia. My mother's from there. My mother's family's from there. We have family. That's where we're all from. I'm like, you don't hear people say they're from San Andres.
You have African slave. My grandfather is a historian. He's Waldwin Peterson. He's a historian of the island. And he has all the ship records of all the slaves that came in during slavery under the Spanish rule and the Dutch. And that's the history of Colombia. That's why many people in San Andres have Dutch last names, some Irish last names. Not all of them have traditional Spanish names, even though it was
no, they don't.
Yeah, exactly. Because even though Spain owned the island, it was managed by the Dutch. And the first Dutch, the first.
And Colombia used to be Panama. It used to be Panama, Colombia, I think Venezuela, and I think it's Venezuela or Ecuador. It was Colombia. It used to be Panama, I think Venezuela, and Uruguay. I don't remember exactly which other country besides Panama and Colombia. It could have been, I don't remember, but it was, it was Colombia, but it was called something else too.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was Providence Island. I think that was the original.
Providencia.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's when the sea flower had come. Like, America had the Mayflower, they had the sea flower. And the sea flower was the ship that brought over Christianity and started teaching the slaves about Christianity, and then they built the ship. And slavery ended, I believe, 50 or 75 years before America in those islands. And so Livingston, after his wife had died, he had children, and there was a Spanish decree where they had to adopt their slave wives. They didn't call it marriage because they were slaves, but they had to give their wives their names if they had children with those slaves. So,
is that in your book too?
That's in the history book. That's on book 2 is what I'm working on for Runaway Slave.
Oh, and so all that's going to be in book 2?
Yes, it's working on book
cool.
2. Yeah. Because
Panama separated from Colombia in 1903 when they did the treaty with the United States to build the Panama Canal, and my grandmother's family immigrated from Jamaica to Panama in the early 1900s. And she had children and children and children in Panama, never went back to Jamaica, and that's how we became Panamanian. But then she married my Colombian grandfather from San Andres.
Yes. And you have a lot of Jamaicans that came over to Colombia. And that's why you have patois and you have Spanish and you have English on the
Yes.
side.
Yes. A lot of flights. A lot of them came from Barbados, St. Lucia, and Jamaica.
Yes, and that's
look how comics can educate.
Comics is totally educating right now.
And
like we're having like this is a panel discussion. Seriously. Yeah, this was and a lot of people don't know also is that it was going to be the Nicaraguan and France Canal, and the United States made the treaty with Panama, ended up getting with the agreement that it was actually 1899 because it was 100 years. They allowed the United States to be in Panama for 100 years. That's why Panama got their liberation from the United States in 1999, and that's why they went down and got Noriega, because they felt that he was going to mess up everything that they had done to make Panama a better place. Panama, the United States made the deal with the Panamanian Canal, with Panama for the canal, in the agreement that Panama left Colombia. So that's because it was going to be the Nicaragua Canal, not the Panama Canal. It was Nicaragua and France. The United States, of course, they muscled the contract. But, it's amazing, boy, we could talk on and on here. Seriously, we could go on.
But it's important for people to know that. I mean, and when the first component, the runaway slave, the first story was more about the New York slave that escaped. I just said, this guy was a slave in the North. How do I connect this to my family? And talking to my grandfather and talking to my mom about the history, the oral history that we have of slavery and the origins from the island, I started to compose these two separate stories. So book one is really about the main story that happens in New York. And then his wife is separated from him. So in book two, we get the wife's perspective, where you get at the very end of number one, and then book two, which it's in progress right now, we get the wife's perspective. Her name was Josephine. That was her real name. So Josephine was a slave in Jamaica, and then they moved to San Andres. And I'm actually going to try to show how she had this relationship with the slave owner and how they came about in having kids, and then adoption / marriage years later. So, I mean, because everyone is mixed on the island. I mean, in America, we look at slavery and we have Harriet Tubman, we have these slave heroes of the South and liberating them from the North, but you don't really get these stories in Latin America.
No. Cuba, Santo Domingo. I was in Cuba, too, in 2002, and the history was amazing. It was just crazy. The history was crazy.
It's in a book, but no one's paying attention to it. And we have our own slave stories of these heroic people, like the first pirates. One of my ancestors was a pirate on Black Bear's ship. These were These are people that escaped slavery, and they became pirates. And the term honor among thieves was not from white pirates of the Caribbean. There were black pirates of the Caribbean who shared the booty whenever they attacked one of these ships that were, in their zone, that they, when they took cargo, and they shared it amongst each other. They shared the wealth. And these are concepts that we've lost over the terms. I mean, I love Johnny Depp, but I mean, he's nowhere near
does not represent what that is.
He doesn't represent it. It doesn't represent anything that's in history.
No.
And many people were mixed. I mean, before segregation, before Jim Crow, people were naturally mixing, and yes, there were stigmas out there, but people did it anyway around the world.
They did it anyway around the world. Like, I tell people, with the people that my ancestors, we ended up in Panama and Colombia. However, and my grandmother's father's from Nicaragua. So, but her mother is from Jamaica. So when the African slave trade happened, we went from Africa to England, and then England to Jamaica.
Wow.
So slavery was happening all over the world. I mean, it was England, Scotland, it was that UK area, and then we ended up in Jamaica. And then from Jamaica in the 1800s, we ended up in Panama. And then from then on, we all became Panamanians. with Spanish being the first language and the English was patois because they still passed down the patois from the Jamaicans. You see what I'm saying?
That's
so
correct.
we spoke the patois broken English, but we killed the Spanish. It was like, that was our first language. And, my mother is a native of the country. My mother lived in Colombia. My mother lived in Panama. I was born in Panama. Came to the United States as a little girl. As stated, Spanish is my first language. I just learned English perfect because I went to school here, and we were made fun of because, you didn't see black Latinas back when we came. They were like, oh, you sound like a Jamaican, or you might be, how you know Spanish? It was unbelievable. It's like, dude, you are so ignorant right now, but it's okay. You can make fun of me, but I'm gonna learn English. I'm gonna learn it better than you. So people don't even know who they're talking to a lot of times when they're talking to me on the phone, unless I say a slang. Then they're like, okay, she must be, from the inner city. But unless I'm speaking, in perfect English, you don't even know. You can't decipher who you may be talking to on the other line. I learned English perfectly because I saw also what my family went through. And, of course, after my grandfather died in Colombia, my grandmother came to the United States in the 60s, and she married what we call a gringo puertorriqueño. He was Puerto Rican, but he was like a light, very, he was a white Puerto Rican. And he bought her house. He took care of her, and that's how we all ended up coming to the United States. My grandmother was married 4 times. So, even the conversation that we're having right now, it's amazing because this is what happened as a result of comics. We're talking about comics.
Exactly, yes. Comic books is what it's all about, yeah.
Comics brought all this
bridges gaps and changes lives.
Exactly. As a result of a conversation with Ray and Regine about their next projects, it's talking about comics. And so, like you guys said, you guys are, my listeners, you guys have a perfect example of education and literacy right now. Right now.
Yes. Yes. It's across the curriculum, arts and history and English and we talk about language. All these things are components that, kids won't get by looking at YouTube and stuff like that. But you pick up a comic book and you can get a wealth of history of through adventure. So you're being entertained, you're being educated, and you're looking at great artwork, and you have great writing. And I think, Regine's books do that as well. I mean, her stories of sci-fi and eating vampires, it's like they have these great historical aspects to them. Even, like her first one, The Rippers, has a great video game history to it too. Like, it's just like you pull from all strands of inspiration from all directions, and then people can make connections with that. And that's how you affect change. That's how we make change, is by inspiring other people to inspire themselves and to motivate them to do something they never thought or dreamed that they could do until they pick up something that changes their life.
Well, you want to just quickly, do you have any last words, Regine and Ray, that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up and I start uploading?
Well, just that, again, we have a lot of things going on in the next few months, and we're always posting on, social media. We're all over Twitter, Instagram, and the like. And while Comic-Con is going on, I will be attempting to Snapchat. So God bless me with that. I'm going to try keep people up to date to see, what's going on with the con, what's going on with Women in Comics, what's going on with Lock It Down Productions, and so forth. And, yeah, check out my website, lockitdown.com. Check out my books, The Rippers, Ice Witch, and Eating Vampires, as Ray mentioned. And, of course, the Women in Comics website, womenincomicscollective.org.
And go ahead, Ray.
2017, Regine and I will be putting together at the New York Public Library in the Bronx again, Women in Comics 3, the 3rd annual comic convention. The date is to be announced. And you can look at my website, www.aworldwithoutsuperheroes.com. And for the Women in Comics info and Bronx Heroes info, bxhcc.com.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. You guys are innovators. I'm telling you, you're blazing the path. And you know what's scary? Go ahead.
No,
So what's scary?
What's scary?
What's scary is that you guys are blazing a path, like in a good way. It's a good scary, because what I was getting ready to say is that you guys have gone mainstream now. So there's no turning back. There's no turning back. You guys are now going mainstream, and the world is getting ready to know your names and what you do. And that's what I'm excited. I'm scary excited. Like, yeah, I can't wait. It's like, oh my God, it's that type of excitement. That when I mean that, scary. Like,
we have to tell your listeners that you're going to be on panel on Thursday.
Say that one more time. Go ahead.
We have to tell your listeners that you're going to be on panel at Sandiego-Comic-Con.
Oh, yeah, well, you can tell them. You tell them. Because this is about you.
Yes, so if you're going to Sandiego-Comic-Con and you're a big fan of Kimberly Jesika, please come down to room 25 ABC and see our Women of Color in Comics panel. It's sure to be awesome.
I'm so excited now. And Ray, you're there too? Ray, you're there as well?
Yeah, we'll be there. We can have some laughs and talk.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet all of you. This is going to be exciting. And Regine, guys, just so you know, Regine gave me my first panel ever for comics. So she is like my shiro. Seriously, she is my utter shiro right now. So, it's a domino effect here. Regine doing what she's been doing. Ray saw what she was doing, said, oh, come over here and do this. And before you know it, as a result, it all ended up on Facebook, and here I am, and you got a movement for the people. I hear Bob Marley in the background. Movement for the people. You got the movement for the people going. It's an exodus.
Last night as well. Last night it was a very moving, emotional time in the San Diego library. It was a powerhouse.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to wrap up, because I love the story. We got to bring you guys back, too.
Well, the San Diego Public Library, they're super awesome. They had us do a panel for them last year, and they invited us back to do two this year. So we were at the Central Public Library, and we had a wonderful audience, and many of them were just touched by what we were saying in terms of our experiences as women, also as women of ethnicity and color. And there were tears in the audience. I'm like, oh my God, don't make me cry too.
Wow.
And then Ray met a woman that was asking us questions. She's a teacher and a mother, and she was getting emotional outside of the building about the panel. So what we do really, it matters. It matters. Being a woman in comics matters. Being a person of ethnicity matters, because people get to see themselves reflected through you. So it is very moving and touching, and I'm hoping we'll have the same experience with the other two panels this week.
Oh, most definitely. I think it will be. I think we're moving mountains in California. That's for sure.
Yes, yes, you are. You are moving mountains, and I'm glad I'm a part of that mountain. I'm glad I get to just sit on the side of it and wave my tiny little fish like puppy power and scoot. I'm strappy too, so I'm waving my puppy power hands, because I'm like, we're creating a movement, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. I'm glad to be part of you guys' business and lives, and I think we can make a huge difference. So I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time to interview with us today, with Regine from Women in Comics, and then we have ray-felix. He's also part of the movement with Women in Comics, and with the bronx-comic-con. Ray, Regine, I just really want to thank you guys for being the change agents, the way showers, and the catalysts. I thank you for who you are, and I can't wait to hear, what else is going to be coming up. And I look forward to meeting you guys on Thursday. I'm honored.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
Thank you for being a part of it. Absolutely. Thanks for inviting us on.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Placer. So, placeres. So we say placeres. It's my pleasure. So, without further ado, thank you guys again. And we look forward to talking to you guys soon again.
All right. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Take care.
All right, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Anyone there?